Welcome to the Miracles and Grace podcast. I'm your host, Grace Marina Cackett, and today we have a really fun and special guest, Vallie Collins.
Hello.
Vallie, I have known literally since the day I was born, which is also her birthday. So, do you want to tell us how we know each other and how you know my mom, and just a little bit about yourself?
Yes. So thank you for having me. I'm so honored and happy
for coming. Oh my
to
gosh.
be here.
Vallie driven from a little city outside of Knoxville, so she drove 3 hours to be here with us.
So happy to be here. I would drive 5 times that many hours to be with you, Gracie.
Thank you.
So Grace's mom and I, we met in the 7th grade. We grew up in the same town. Her mother, Suzanne, was the new girl. I had been the new girl just 3 years before, so I vividly remembered how that felt. So I wanted to befriend her. Come to find out, your mom was more interested in being my friend because I was really good in math and she was not as good in math. So she was like, she's going to help me get through this math class. So in the 7th grade, that's when we hit it off as friends. And now, 42 years later, she's still my ride or die best friend. I've known you literally since you were, I didn't know you in your mom's womb, but I remember hearing that you were coming. And on March 14th, 1996,
Yep.
Is that right?
Yep.
I was in Knoxville and your mom called me late that afternoon. It was my birthday, so I thought she was calling to say happy birthday, as she had done for so many years. And I answered the phone and she goes, "You're not going to believe this." I was like, "What?" She goes, "I had the baby today." And it was kind of like this negative. I was like, "On my birthday?" She was like, "Yes, can you believe that?" So on my 25th birthday, she had her very first child, which was you.
Yep. And also funny, what birthday was it? I think it was maybe my last one that we were all somewhere, like maybe at so also Vallie is on the board of Love One, our nonprofit that does work in Uganda. So we get to do that together too. But I think we were at our Love One Ambassadors Retreat, and somebody said, "How old are you?" And I was like, I think I said, "I'm 28." And Vallie was like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Yes, I am." And she was like, "You're 29. Or maybe at the time I thought I was 27 and I was actually 28. But regardless, Vallie is extremely smart. And she was like, "No, because you were born in 1996 and I was born in
1971.
1971. She was like, "So we have exactly a 25-year age gap, and I am this age. And if you do the math, that means that you're this age." I was like, okay, she's right. I'm actually 28. Never mind.
That was a moment. I tend to overstep when I shouldn't. But I'm like, no, that's not how old you are. I know exactly how. Dates are my gift set. I think if I have a gift set, it's dates. I was like, no, that's not how old you are.
Me and Davey were just saying, I was trying to explain the years of like the timeline of us dating and getting engaged. And he was like, "You are so bad at this." And I was like, forget the years. We were dating in June of some year.
Yeah, exactly.
So our weaknesses and strengths complement each other here.
For sure.
Especially when it comes to my own birthday.
Yes.
But yeah, so we get to do Love One together. Vallie has 3 kids and is married to Steve.
Yes. 27 years last week.
Oh, congratulations. Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Just, I guess it's kind of a mini milestone. Past 25, not quite to 30.
Yeah.
So.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Is there anything else about yourself you would like to share?
I do have 3 children. I mean, they are my pride and joy. I have a girl and 2 boys, 26, 23,
Not to be in the same boat, just flip-flopped?
Yep. So, I'm, new to the empty nesting life. I'm trying to get kind of adjusted to that. It's a new season, a fun season. About the time you get used to it, they start coming home for whatever reason. So, the youngest is coming home for the summer here soon. So, yeah.
So awesome. One of the reasons that I wanted to have Vallie on the podcast, I said this, she's so smart and y'all will love hearing from her. This is also just a fun fact. This is what I was going to say. She is a biomedical engineer and has helped develop a lot of really cool products. Like in the toothpaste, like the Crest toothpaste. I love, this is like my favorite. Colgate. And Colgate toothpaste has the little strips in the toothpaste to like help freshen your breath. She helped develop that, What are some other cool things you developed?
My company I used to work for, we worked on the breathe rights, like the nose, nasal. Yeah, you could use the breathe rights. In my company I worked for, we made millions and millions and millions of breathe rights. A lot of medical device type things that stick to your skin. Nothing really implanted in your body, but IV site holders, catheter tube holders, things that stick to your skin was what my career was in for about 20 years. I worked in the manufacturing side, quality side, and then I worked on the sales side.
Yep. So cool. So obviously there's lots of cool things about Vallie, but one of the reasons that I wanted to have her on the podcast, obviously, we love to talk about miracles, and Vallie has an insane miracle story. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the flight that crashed on the Hudson River in 2009.
Correct.
So it's been
16 years.
Thank you. I'm not even going to try to do math on this podcast. But Vallie was on that flight. And, you know, it's interesting. I've told you this, but I obviously knew that. That was a big happening in our lives, too, because we've always been so close to you. And I remember that happening. But now you go around and you speak and you talk about what your experience was like. And I heard, so when we had our first Love One Ambassador retreat in California, Vallie gave her spiel just of her story and what it was like. And I was so mind blown. You're such a good speaker, but also just like the way that you paint the picture of what happened. And there's so many details. I can't wait to talk about all of it. But one of the reasons I wanted to have her on the podcast was to talk about that and what that experience was like and the multiple miracles that had to happen for you to be sitting here with us today.
Yes.
So would you like to tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, you
Loaded
can stop me if you have a question, because I can just roll on
No, that's good.
with it. So on January 15th, 2009, I was on a business trip to New York. I had flown to New York the day before. I had a meeting on Long Island, and I was just coming home, just a regular. I traveled all the time with my job. My company was based in Minnesota, and I had a home office in Tennessee. So I traveled quite a bit. So I was on my way home. The only kind of unique, odd thing for me is typically I flew Delta. I was like a platinum on Delta. But this particular trip, the US Airways ticket was about $800 less. I remember thinking, well, I'll save my company some money. I'll just go US Airways to New York this time. So the only kind of odd thing about that when I look at it in retrospect is because I never flew US Airways, I had no status on US Airways, but I like aisle seats. So when I checked in for the flight, the only aisle seat available on the whole plane was on the last row of the plane. So totally opposite of where I would normally sit on a plane. If it had been a Delta flight, I'd been up there in that cushy first class because they would have bumped me up. But you know, I got on board the flight. Everything was normal. I remember they were telling us, you know, hurry up, find our seats, stow our belongings. And I got to my seat and I'm about ready to sit down. And I noticed that there was this baby blue baby blanket across the back of my seat. And I grabbed it and I saw the flight attendant and I was like, this isn't my blanket. And she grabbed it. Well, I could see this mom in the galley with the baby. And I thought, well, there's the owner of the blanket. I sat down in my seat, and there was no one at that middle seat, the dreaded middle seat. No one was there yet. Guy at the window, and he and I kind of start talking. We start chatting. I vividly remember he had one of those WWJD bracelets on. He was a corporate professional, you know, about my age. And at the course of our conversation, I picked up that he loved hang gliding. So he's like, I always pick window seats because I like to look out. I'm like, I pick aisle seats because I like to get out. So we were really, really happy. We depart pretty quickly, and I do remember thinking, well, they've been telling us it was a completely full flight. You know how you get on flights, like, stow your belongings, hurry up, we're completely full. But there was the empty seat. Nobody came to sit in that empty middle seat. So as we backed away from the gate, I literally looked at my seatmate, and I said, well, this must be our lucky day, because we're going to have all that elbow room to Charlotte. You know, well, little did I know how true those words would be in less than about 10 minutes. Mm. Some people may wonder, well, it was a full flight. Why did y'all have an empty seat? And that is because the baby counted as a passenger, even though he was sitting in his mother's lap. You know, we took off from LaGuardia. Everything was pretty normal, pretty typical for about the first minute and a half. But somewhere between a minute and a half and 2 minutes at an altitude of about 2,800 feet. So we're not very high in the air. We hear a boom. And the plane dropped. You know, not a lot, just a little bit, but I looked at the guy at the window and I was like, what was that? And he said, it was birds. I said, oh.
Because he could see them.
Because he could see them, because he was looking out the window. That's his hobby. He was into hang gliding. That's why he gets a window seat. And I thought, oh. Well, then to my left, I see smoke and smell like this awful, awful odor that we now know is burning goose flesh.
Oof.
Are we having chicken for lunch?
Yeah, I hope not.
But that drew
Goose
up
tacos.
this memory in my mind, because years before I'd been on a very turbulent flight, and a pilot who was a passenger, he saw I was nervous about the turbulence. And he leaned over and he said, "Ma'am, don't worry about turbulence." He said, "All we worry about in the cockpit are birds and fire." So I thought, I had this moment of, oh, great, we've got both birds and fire. This is not good. The flight attendant came up from the galley. She's trying to get something from behind my seat, so I got up to grant her access. She told me to sit back down in the middle seat, so I sat back down. I buckled up as tightly as I could, and I looked at my seatmate, and I said, "I have 3 children to raise. This can't be it. This cannot be the end, because I have 3 children to raise." Kind of like nobody else on board had anything to live for.
How old were they at the time?
They were 9, 6, and 4. So they were little.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell people, I am not the perfect mother, but I'm their mother.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I didn't come home to them, that was going to significantly affect the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
My seatmate very calmly looked at me and he said, "I have a daughter, and I'm going to see her tonight." He had such a faith.
Chills.
Yeah, and I so wanted to believe him, but I didn't. I'm an engineer. I'm a frequent flyer. I realize at this point there's no thrust, there's no engine noise, and we aren't climbing. And typically, jetliners don't crash and have a bunch of people walk away. So, I found myself sitting in a moment that I truly believed was my very last. So when I speak to people, I'll ask people, so if you found yourself sitting in a moment that you truly believe was your very last, who do you want to call? More importantly, what do you say? That answer was pretty easy for me, because I thought of Steve, I thought of our kids, I thought, shame on Steve and me. This is way before the days of Google calendars and tracking flights. And so I thought, he doesn't even know I'm on board this plane. It could take him hours, days, a week, to get the confirmation that yes, she was on board. So I looked down and I had put my purse underneath the seat in front of me, and there's my BlackBerry telephone sticking out. I told you how long ago this was. There were no iPhones. So I pulled out the BlackBerry, I turned it on, and I sent Steve a text message. And it just said, "My flight is crashing. Period." Now I'm going to brag, as a graduate of the University of Tennessee, it had perfect punctuation and spelling. Steve
and
later,
on a BlackBerry.
I am a BlackBerry, no less. Steve later got on to me. He was like, "Honey, could you have not said I love you or kiss the kids or it was real?" But I told him, I said, as I was typing it, my seatmate said, "Put that up. You're out of time." And I remember thinking, oh, Lord, I'm out of time? Really? At 37? I'm out of time? I come from this family with a tremendous legacy of longevity. I had a great-grandmother lived to 104. On that day, at 37 years old, 3 of my 4 grandparents were still alive.
Yeah.
So I always pictured 97 at the nursing home for me.
Yeah.
Not 37 in a plane crash. It was just unimaginable. It could not believe it. But I remember thinking, I accepted the Lord into my heart a long time ago. Your granddaddy, he baptized me. Suzanne's dad was my Baptist preacher.
He is 94?
4, yeah.
And he is still preaching every Sunday. We always say he will die at the pulpit.
Yeah, he will. Can I say a little aside? So he's about 2 years ago, so he's 92. I'm at your mom's house, and I grew up at your grandparents' house every weekend. Your mom lived in town, and I lived in the country, so we would stay at her house on the weekends. So he's probably made me as many breakfasts as my own mother has. He would always make us eggs and biscuits and chocolate gravy, and so I was there at their home a lot.
Yeah.
But he walks into your mom's house a couple years ago, and I'm there, and I'm thinking, he's 92. He may not remember me. I didn't want him to feel awkward. I'm like, hey, JB, it's Vallie. And he goes, I know exactly who you are. He goes, you talked through every one of my sermons.
No, he didn't.
He did. So he's like, oh, I know who you are. Because your mom and I probably were guilty of sitting in the back, talking through the sermons, making our plans for the afternoon versus paying
Those
attention.
Southern Baptist sermons can get long.
They can get long, but I do love him.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Anyway, where was I even? Oh, so I come with this longevity. So I really could not believe that this was it. But I accepted the Lord in my heart a long time ago. So I was very clear on where I was going. My one grandfather that had already passed away, Daddy Smitty, he was an avid golfer. And I know this sounds crazy, but I remember thinking, well, he'll be there waiting for me and we'll go play some golf. What does golf look like in heaven? But I also thought, well, Lord, if this is your will, I accept it. I'm not crazy about it, if I'm really honest.
I feel that.
But I accept it.
Yeah.
And so that kind of gave me a peace, a calm. But I remember I had a reluctant acceptance, if you will, in that moment. But I was just, you get asked the question, what was going through your mind? And to frame this for everybody listening, from the time that the birds hit our engines till the time we landed on the Hudson River was 3.5 minutes. Which maybe doesn't sound like a long time in our day-to-day, but when you sit and you do nothing, I'd challenge you, sit and just look straight in the eyes of someone else for 3.5 minutes. It's a long time.
Yeah.
It's a commercial break. You can pop popcorn, go to the bathroom. There's really a lot you can do.
Yeah.
So I had these moments of thinking I was just so sad about all the things I was going to miss. I knew heaven would be great, but I was so very sad that I was not going to get to see my children grow up. I wasn't going to be the mother of the bride. I wouldn't see Cade hit his first home run. Who's going to plan their birthday parties? Today, I'll still kind of tear up just that all those things I was not going to get to be a part of. And then over the PA system came, the most calm, steady, in control voice I've ever heard. And he said 2 really short sentences. He said, this is the captain. Brace for impact. That will, any thoughts you're having in your head, that will pull you back out like, wait, what? Brace for impact. So just like it says on the little safety card, I bent over and put my arms underneath my legs and sort of folded down. And the flight attendants are chanting, brace, brace, heads down, feet flat on the floor, brace, brace. And then in my ear, I hear my seatmate, who is still looking out the window. He says, be ready. We're going in the water. And I thought, okay, airplane water landing. Most likely, what's going to happen is this plane is going to cartwheel. It's going to bust into a lot of different pieces. So, Vallie, if you're conscious, just swim to the light. Swim to the light.
That's such a way to process that, because I would not think that. I think I'd be like, maybe we'll slide. You know what I mean? That's such a you response.
Yeah, that is a me response. But I mean, pragmatically, and I'm just thinking, this is what the physics of this should look like. And if you look at water ditchings, that's what this is called, a water ditching. There really weren't any successful water ditchings, for sure not of jumbo jet airliners like we were on. We were on an Airbus A320, not a jumbo jet, but it is a jet. Wow. So I thought, we're just gonna cartwheel. We're gonna bust. Just if there's light, try to swim to it. That's just what I told myself, and I think this is an example of mentally what we get ourselves prepared for. Has a whole lot to do with how well we accept the reality of a situation when it actually occurs, whatever it is. Because mentally, I was prepared for the very worst.
Yeah.
But fortunately, as everyone knows, the worst didn't happen that day because Captain Sullenberger and First Officer Skiles, they made a textbook landing on the Hudson River. And part of that required that they bring the tail of the airplane down first. And we hit the water at about 160 miles an hour. And I had the good fortune of sitting in the tail of the airplane.
Smooth ride.
It's a smooth ride that hit the river at 160 miles an hour. And, it was rough and it was violent and it shook a lot.
You're probably sore.
Yeah, but when we seemingly stopped and I looked up and I was in one piece and that plane was in one piece.
Oh my gosh.
My first thought, honestly, was, well, that wasn't that bad. Like, I've had worse landings on runways.
Yeah.
Because mentally, I was prepared.
Yeah. To die.
For so much worse. Right. Yeah. I literally could not believe when I looked up and that plane was in one piece and I was in one piece. I literally could not believe it.
Yeah.
So, true to my personality, I'm a little bossy, a little Charles in charge. I popped my head up. I looked at my seatmate. This is so embarrassing. I didn't remember saying this till I met him about 9 months later, but he told me what I said, and he was right. But I popped my head up. I looked at him. I pointed at him, and I said, "Open that window."
He's like, "Yes, ma'am."
And he was like, "Okay, where's the button?" Well, airplane windows don't open.
Right.
So I realized, yeah, okay, the airplane window's not open. That's how I'm getting out. But I'm thinking, all right, I'm on the last row of the plane. Closest exit's the back. I bolt to the galley. I'm in the rear galley. I'm the first passenger back there. And the flight attendant, she doesn't realize we're in the water at this point, and she's trying to crack open the left rear door. Well, I went over and began assisting her and trying to open that door, because when you want out and it says exit, you're doing whatever you can do. Well, there's no way we're going to get that door open because the water pressure is so much stronger than she and I are. Then she looks around and she says, "Oh no, we're in the water." And she said, "You have 2 minutes, go to the wings." And she went on up towards the wings. More passengers are coming to the rear galley. They're trying to get the right rear door open, and it won't open either. And this is really, Grace, probably my scariest moment. Even scarier than before we landed in the river. Because in a matter of seconds, water went from my ankles to above my chest. And it was 35-degree water. Ugh. On a 22-degree day. So it's like Titanic cold.
Yeah.
It felt like needles in my body.
Also, drowning would be a way worse way to die than a plane crashing.
Correct. And if I've ever had an irrational fear, one of my irrational fears aside of snakes, which I think is a rational fear, but one of my irrational fears was always being in a car that went off a bridge and went underwater and not able to get out of that car. So I'm in that airplane galley, which is not very big, and the water is rising. I remember thinking, "Oh, Lord, please do not let me drown."
Yeah.
Like, I just do not want to drown.
Yeah.
And as crazy and as hokey as this may sound, I had this peace come over me, and I instinctively knew that panicking was not going to save my life.
Yeah.
I knew I had to pull it together to get off that airplane.
Also, a Vallie response.
That's what my sister's like. God put the right sister on the plane. He said, "I done lost it." But I look in front of me in the peaceful airplane atmosphere before we hit the water, because it was really quiet before. It's gone. It's chaos. People are climbing over the seats. People are trying to get their luggage out of the overhead.
Because when he said brace for impact, there was no sound?
No, it was just quiet. Wow. The only sounds I remember hearing at that point was just a whoosh of air going by. Kind of like being in a car wash with the dryers. It was eerily quiet before we hit the water. Mm. But when we're trying to get out, it was pretty chaotic. But a lot of people in the back of the plane are still trying to come to the back, thinking the closest exit's the back.
Yeah.
Well, I'm 100% sure we're not getting out the back.
Yeah.
I mean, the back is sinking. So I just put up both my hands in the strongest, loudest Southern voice I could muster there in New York City. I just started chanting, "Go to the wings. Go to the wings." And people started to turn, and they started to move towards the wings. And so it was sort of like walking uphill at this point. So as I walked uphill, the water started to subside. There was a seat cushion floating by. So I grabbed it, put it on my arm, continued to chant, "Go to the wings." After this experience, I had this reporter interview me. And he said, "Mrs. Collins," he said, "what you did directing people to the wings," he said, "it was just so heroic." I told him, I said, "No, sir." I said, "There was no heroism involved at all. I simply wanted out, and they were all in my way." My mama taught me not to push. But I made it to the wings. I took a right-hand turn. I came out on the right wing. I'm one of the last passengers out. The scene out on the wing was pretty chaotic. The slide has deployed out of the wing. Passengers are spilling onto that slide. So they're turned into a makeshift raft. And I look to my left, and there's the mom. And she's holding that baby. And she has another child. And she's very distraught, as any mother would be.
Yeah.
People on the raft are saying, throw the baby. And I'm thinking, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So she handed me her baby. I gave him to someone more secure in the raft. She gave me her daughter. We sat down on the edge of the raft. And then my concern was, if she and I fall back in this water, can I physically save us both?
Because of how cold it was.
Cold it was, and the Hudson River rolls. I mean, it wasn't like being on a calm pond. It's got a current to it.
Yeah.
And it's so cold. They're throwing down life jackets. So I got my life jacket, got my seat cushion, got this little 4-year-old girl in my lap, and I thought, okay, Vallie, you got to calm down. You're the adult. This child has to be scared to death. I'm rubbing her head, tell her it's going to be okay. And I look down and she's not saying anything, but she's chewing on my arm through my sweater. So that's what I was...
4-year-old?
4-year-old. I'm kind of like, okay, this is not a bad dream because I can feel these teeth. They're on my arm. And I looked down and you know what she was holding?
The blanket.
The blanket that was draped across the back of my seat.
I've heard the story before, but that was still kind of a guess.
Yeah. And you can choose to believe in signs or not, but I choose to think maybe I was tagged to help them that day. But really, in actuality, she was the bigger blessing for me because she forced me to stay calm.
Yeah.
Because we sat on our raft for, I'm going to say, 10 to 12 minutes, which is the time it took for our ferry boat to get to us, the Yogi Berra, so we could get climbed out and onto the safety of a ferry boat. And just a big shout out, I always like to say when I speak, to all first responders everywhere. Because the first responders of New York and New Jersey, whether they were professional police officers or they were the ferry boat captains or they were just civilians who happened to have a boat in the area at that time, Sullenberger did a great job getting our plane in the river. But had it not been for that collective effort of all those people coming together, I don't know that we would have had 155 survivors.
Yeah.
The aircraft sunk in 24 minutes. And they had all 17 of us rescued. They had all 155 of us rescued in less than about 17 minutes. So that's miraculous.
Yeah. Okay, one of the things that I think is, it's been years since I've heard this, so I'm like listening to it as if I'm hearing the details for the first time. But one of the things a few things that you've told me that have just blown my mind is that, because you said if the plane had capsized, it would have sucked everyone down with it.
Potentially, yes.
So,
or split in half. It could have broken in half, and that, yeah.
Yeah. So, even it's not just the plane landing in one piece and nobody being knocked unconscious, everybody making it off 7 minutes before the plane sunk, which could have taken you all down with it. But I remember you saying there was, if it had been something with the water temperature and something with the boats being out on the river.
Yeah. So the timing. If you're familiar with New York and New Jersey and the Hudson River, a lot of people live in New Jersey, but they work in New York. So they use these ferries to go back and forth across the Hudson River every day as their mode of transportation to get into the city. So most people get off work at, 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30, something like that. So we landed on the Hudson River at 3:31 p.m. So the ferry boats were, and the captains of the ferry boats, everybody was getting ready for that afternoon commute. So they had ferry boat captains on board getting ready, but the ferry boats were not out in the middle of the river just yet. So had it been, an hour later, there could have been boats with people on them that could have totally affected our landing. Also, the fact that they were there and ready allowed them to get to us in that short amount of time. This happened on January 15th. Had it been 3 weeks or a month later, at this point, it's kind of the start of winter. We're early into winter, so the big ice chunks are just along the edges of the river. They're not out in the middle of the river just yet, which had there been big chunks of ice in the river when we came down, that could have caused us to catapult it could have caused problems too. So for so many things that went wrong, so many things lined up so perfectly for us to be able to survive. You know, I tell people the NTSB, when they did their final report on our airplane incident, they said there's a 1 in 8 billion chance that birds would knock out both engines of a jetliner. Bird strikes happen a lot in America. I think there's 8 to 9,000 a year. Typically, you're taking one engine out and you're going back to the airport, and you know it's all going to be fine. But to take out both engines of a jetliner, it's just almost. I have better chances of winning the lottery.
Wow. That is unbelievable. Every time those details would just blow my mind. But since you are a frequent flyer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I have flown 588 times since that day.
And how also crazy. Talk about the emergency landing that you had after this.
Oh, yeah. That was terrible. So this happened in January of 2009. In December of 2009, I was back to work. I had to take some time. I didn't immediately take time off work. About 6 weeks after, I just wasn't quite myself. I was struggling with some post-traumatic stress disorder type things, so I took 3 or 4 months off. So I was getting back in the swing of work, and I went back part-time. I did not go back full-time. But I went back part-time, which required me to start traveling a little bit more. So that December, I am flying home from Detroit to Knoxville, which is normally an hour and 45-minute flight, 2 hours max. Well, we've been in the air about 45 minutes, and I look out. I'm on an aisle seat, but it's like a 2 and 2. It's a pretty small plane. I'm on an aisle seat, so I can see out the window. The guy next to me, he's asleep. I'm looking out. We've been flying about 45 minutes, but I can still see Detroit. Like, I should not still see Detroit. And I'm very aware on an airplane. I know what the flight time is. Like, I'm paying attention. When you're in an event like the Hudson thing, you start paying attention on airplanes. So I can still see Detroit. So I call the flight attendant and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, why can I still see Detroit? And we've been flying for 45 minutes. She goes, "Well, we've got a little issue. They've got the manuals out." She's talking about the pilot and the co-pilot having the manuals out. So I'm starting to have a panic attack. Literally, I'm like, "Okay, ma'am, what you need to know about me is I was just in the plane that landed in the Hudson River, so I'm very scared." Traumatized. "Will you please keep me informed?" She's like, "Oh, yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am." So she goes back up. She comes back. She goes, "They're military pilots." I'm like, "That's helpful." So the pilot comes on. And he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a little bit of a mechanical issue. We've lost nose steering." He said, which does not affect the flying of the airplane, but it affects the landing. Because when we land, we won't have the ability to steer the plane. He said, and we've been trying to figure out, do we fly on to Knoxville or do we turn back and try to land in Detroit? And he said, and we've decided to fly on to Knoxville because the weather's better in Knoxville. So that means we have about an hour plus more of flight time, knowing that when we land, there's going to be an issue. And he's like, he said, it should be fine, but there's going to be emergency vehicles lining the runway just as a precaution. Well, I am just thinking, this has got to be a joke. Lord, who's in 2 emergency landings in the same year?
Right.
So the flight attendant, she's got us. Now, with this one, we have more time to get the cabin prepared than we did at the Hudson. So she's got people taking their pins out of their pocket, taking their watches off, getting in the brace position as we're coming down. So she's, brace. And I literally just could not believe this was happening. But I do feel like one of the things I've learned, whether it's from this Hudson experience or just living for over 5 decades, is sometimes when you're struggling yourself, the best thing you can do is help someone else. That will help you in a way you don't realize. So I look across the aisle. This is a small plane. It's like a regional jet. So I look across the aisle, and there's this woman, and she's older than I am. She's probably in her 50s. And she's got, I can tell, like her 3 sons, 2 behind her, 1 next to her. And they're in their 20s or older teenagers. And she's very upset. She's very distraught. And I've already figured out the over-the-wing exit is 1 row behind me. I've already checked that out. So I lean out, I put my hand on her arm, and I look at her. I said, "It's going to be okay. But if it's not, follow me. I've done this before."
She's probably like,
she's
what
like,
is happening?
What? She's like, okay. So we get in our brace position. We land. Abrupt stop. As the pilot said, everything was fine. I mean, it scared me to death, but everything was fine. They have where you can't drive the plane, so they have a tug take us to the jet bridge. So we're starting to get off the plane, and the woman across the aisle, she turns back. She's got tears just rolling down her face, and she said, "You'll never know how much I appreciate you just telling me we're going to be okay and that, you were here to help me or follow me or whatever. She said, I lost my husband 5 days ago.
Hmm.
She said, and to think that I might have lost one of my sons today, she goes, it was just really more than I could process.
Hmm.
It was just I don't know, it was just a sweet, it was just it's just something that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
Because I can't even imagine you're dealing in the grief of losing your spouse and then an event. She wasn't even worried about herself. She was worried. She was almost worried about surviving it, but one of her sons not surviving it.
Yeah. Golly.
Yeah, golly. So that kind of threw me back a little bit. I was getting better with my PTSD, but that kind of put me back to square one. Kind of walking back through a lot of those same emotions, and yeah, it was kind of scary. And Steve was like, "Why couldn't that have been me? Why did that have to be you?" He's like, but anyway. So some people are like now, like, I don't know that I want to fly with you. My mom's like, oh no, she's the luckiest fly there is. So
I always think about that. And the odds of something else happening or one. I mean, even those two things, it has to be like 1 in a trillion odds of
probably so.
something crazy.
Yeah, that's what people always say. Oh, what are the odds against that? I'm like, if the odds are against it, it will probably happen to me. So don't use that. Don't use that. Don't use that example with me. I'm like, if the odds are against it, it'll probably happen to me.
Yeah. Will you talk about some of just the things that life experience taught you and the way it affected your perspective in life and about our time on Earth?
Yeah, it's taught me a lot of things. We probably don't have enough, time on this podcast. But it taught my sense of life purpose and life responsibility definitely changed because of this. I want to think that I was a positive, conscientious, thoughtful, good friend, all those kind of things before January 15th of 2009. But I hope any of those positive characteristics I had before that date got magnified and have improved since that date. So that life purpose and responsibility, you think maybe God, he wasn't trying to save me. Maybe it was the person sitting in seat 13D. I don't know. I don't know why I was there or what I was supposed to learn. But I tell people it's kind of like being in the double jeopardy round of Jeopardy. Like, okay, God, I've got this extra time. How do I be the very best version of myself that I can be? How do I make the most of all these extra days I didn't think I was going to have? Grace, we all know we're going to die. Nobody thinks it's going to be today.
Yeah.
And when you sit in a moment and you think, it's today, it really could be today, that will recenter you. That will refocus you very quickly. And one of my challenges now is, as time has gone by, is just to not lose sight of that.
Yeah.
Some days it's hard to hold on to that perspective.
Yeah.
But things it's taught me that I typically share when I speak to audiences, one is just the importance of kindness. Just simply being kind to other people. I remember thinking, had it ended tragically, and my face would have been one of 154 others on the front page of the USA Today. Would the Avis bus driver that took me from the terminal and from the rental car lot to the terminal, would he have thought of me as a kind person? Did I smile at the gate agent when she scanned my ticket and told me to have a nice flight? Was I as friendly as I could possibly be to my seatmate? And what struck me about that is, as we all walk through our day-to-day lives, we really have no idea who that other person is that we may have our very last interaction.
Yeah.
It might be Davy that you kiss goodnight, but it may very well be the drive-thru worker at Starbucks that hands you your fancy latte.
Yeah.
So just simply be kind.
Yeah.
To other people. I learned a lot about empathy. I had, up to that point, fortunately, I'd never really needed any mental health counselor. And even 16 years ago, I think it's great in our country now. I think mental health and mental health issues are a lot more at the forefront than they even were back then. But surely, when I was growing up, you didn't hear a lot about going to counselors and therapists and that sort of thing. But in going through this and being diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, it did give me a real heightened sense of empathy for emotional battles that people deal with, whether it's depression or anxiety or borderline manic. What I learned is that someone can look just fine on the outside, like I did. but you don't necessarily know what they're wrestling with on the inside.
Yeah.
So I just try to give people a little bit of extra empathy for things they're going through, especially for those things that maybe I, fortunately, personally, don't understand.
Yeah.
The third learning that I typically share is just the importance of physical fitness. Just staying physically fit, because you simply don't know when you may be in a situation where you have to physically be able to save your own life, the life of a family member, or maybe just help out a complete stranger. You know, when we went from the wing and the ferry boat, the raft of the plane up to the ferry boat, it was like climbing up a rope climbing wall, and it was probably 15 feet or so above our heads. And you know, you got hypothermia set. It was not easy to do. And I witnessed a lot of people struggling to do that. So I just like to encourage people to the best of your ability. We all have different levels of ability, but try to do something to stay physically fit. And I think staying physically fit helps our mental health as well.
Yeah.
The fourth one, and probably the biggest one that I typically like to share, is just the gift of perspective. It has given me such a gift of perspective. That cliche, and there's two parts to this. The cliche, don't sweat the small stuff, it's really so true.
Mm.
There are very few things in our life that are worth raising our blood pressure up over.
That's so good.
You just don't sweat the small stuff. The person cuts you off on the on-ramp, that's fine. You'll get to where you're going 12 seconds after they do. You know, back when my kids were young and my teenage sons were very messy, I would get so frustrated with how messy they were, you know. But I was like, well, I'm glad I'm still the mom that's here that gets to make them clean up their room. So Don't sweat that small stuff. The second part about perspective is after this happened, I was so overwhelmed. And you've experienced this with going through what y'all are going through with your dad right now. Just that outpouring of love and support that I received from friends and family members and even some complete strangers. But mostly there was this moment, as morbid as this will sound, it was like getting to go to my own funeral. I had this realization of how many relationships I had made over my short 37 years at that point, and how much people really cared.
Yeah.
It was sort of like going to my own funeral. So I think just appreciating those relationships, making sure that all the relationships you've made are as healthy as they can possibly be.
Yeah.
So if you need to extend some gratitude or some forgiveness, go ahead, and do that. And I think never stop making the relationships.
Yeah.
I think we all underestimate the impact that our one life can have over so many others.
Totally.
Then go ahead. No, the last one is just about time. Just I've spent a lot of time just thinking about time and what a precious gift it is, and none of us are guaranteed tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so just appreciating each and every moment to the best of our ability.
Yeah. That's so good.
I feel like I've had diarrhea of the mouth.
No, I'm like, it's just such it's so mind-blowing. All the details. It's one of my favorite stories because of how redemptive it is, and just God's hand in all of it is undeniable. And I think you hear stories like that. I mean, down to the hours and the minutes he was protecting you. Yes, the intricacies that had to happen for the outcome that happened to happen are just too many to chalk up to coincidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so I love that story so much. And I was going to say, I'm probably going to talk about this sermon a million times as we record this season of the podcast. But have you listened to that podcast about the Bema seat?
Yes, I have. And boy, doesn't that put a mirror in front of you. I'm like, I don't think I have any crowns. Right. Oh, no. I got to get some crowns.
But you're talking about, well, that's not true. You have a lot of crowns. But I may have referenced this on every podcast we've recorded so far in some capacity. But in this sermon, which I'll also link in this podcast notes.
It's great.
It's so good. And basically the gist of the sermon is that this guy, Jesus, comes back, and it's a random, Tuesday, and he's on his way to work. And he goes into, the judgment day for Christians, which is not what I thought it would look like.
Me either, yeah.
So many things I learned.
Yep, me too.
But at the end of it, well, I don't want to spoil it. Essentially, the whole time he's in heaven, about to enter heaven, he's thinking, I wish I could have done so many things differently, because now I'm talking to Jesus, and we're talking about the crowns of my life, like the crowns that I got because of the way that I love people and spread the gospel. And there's so much overlap. It's like this sermon that I just listened to that's so life-changing. It's the same realization in a lot of ways that you had. But this is an anecdote, like it's a story.
Right.
And yours was real life.
Right. Real life.
But being faced with that moment of, like, what has my life been so far? I wonder how many people on that plane were reeling with regret of things, you know? Like, you lived a great life. It's not like you were beating yourself up. But I bet there were people in that situation being like, oh my gosh, there's a million things I wish I had done differently, or I wanted to do, but I didn't do. And I even feel this from starting this podcast. I don't know. I told you the story at the retreat of how I just felt like I was putting it off and putting it off and putting it off to start it. And then I was like, hey, I'm just being disobedient at this point. And even though it's not something that I'm super passionate about, I think I already am loving it. I'm loving doing it. But my dream has never been to start a podcast.
Right. Exactly.
But it's so easy to put things off that you feel like you're supposed to do, or that are of importance, or that can have impact and affect other people positively. But you're in a situation like that, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that are like, oh, there were all these things that I wanted to do that I was putting off. And so, to wrap up that thought that was kind of scattered, if you're listening and there's something that you feel compelled to do that can have a positive impact in the world, help people know Jesus, that you feel like God's telling you to do or calling you into, do it. Because to her point, you just never know when today is your last day, or today is somebody else's last day. Right. And I think it is so cliche, but you just always think, oh, well, if someone's gets a terminal diagnosis or is diagnosed with cancer, you kind of think that, in my head, I think the ways to go are a diagnosis like that, or dying in a nursing home at the old age of 100.
Right. There's a lot in between.
Yeah, you kind of block out the fact that people die unexpectedly, but it's reality.
It is. It is the world. You know, and I'll to tag on a little bit what you were saying. I will guarantee you, in the 3.5 minutes from when the birds hit our engines till the time we land on the Hudson River, not one of us on board that airplane were worried about how many unanswered emails were in our inbox.
Yeah.
How much money was in our checking account. Whether our yards were mowed or our dishwashers were unloaded. We were all focused on the time we were going to miss.
Yeah.
With the people that we loved.
Yeah.
And that's the stuff.
Yeah.
That's the time that you invest in others and loving others well. That's the kingdom stuff. That's what's really important. I recently read a book, and it said, never underestimate the big importance of small things. So for you, even just doing this podcast might seem small. For me, I might just go speak to a group of 50 people. I might speak to a group of 2,000, might be 50, and it seems small or you just never know the impact you might be having to help someone else. Yeah,
that's so good. I'm glad you shared the emergency landing story, because that's such a perfect example. You had so much trauma that you carried with you into that moment, and you could have been like, I'm shutting everybody else out. And the fact that you sought out that woman, and then I'm so thankful that you got to see what it meant to her.
Me too. But I didn't do it for her. I did it for me.
Right, but
that's what some of our biggest, if you're not that you do something for someone else seeking a reward, no, that's not the reason to do it. But I'm just so amazed how many times that I'm really just trying to help myself by helping someone else, and it just comes full circle. And it was such a sweet moment.
Yeah, my mom always says the key to a successful marriage is to try to outserve your spouse.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same concept. Like, we all want a good marriage. So you might be serving your spouse to have a good marriage, but the reality is it might be something that's like for you because you want this outcome, but it impacts the other person in such a great way. Yeah. Serving is like, we were just made to serve. And I think,
That's right.
I mean, I've grown up in a house that is very service oriented
Yes, you have.
with, you just don't have an option not to serve people when you have eight kids in your house. You have to help people
That's right.
all the
Whether
time.
you want to or not.
Yeah, but it's instilled that in me, and I mean, Jesus was a servant, and we're
Right.
supposed to be like Jesus, and that's one of my favorite qualities about Jesus and the way that he lived his life on earth is that he just constantly served. And it's like in that moment, you may not have been like, I'm doing this for her, but you still did it, and that was still being Jesus to her, and she still was so moved by it. And so I just love that, like, in the moments when maybe it doesn't come naturally to step out and serve and think about somebody else. It's such a good takeaway.
Yeah, it was
Such
sweet,
a good impact.
It was a sweet moment.
I feel like people are going to want to know if you have kept up with the people on the
Yes,
flight.
you know, when you go through an experience like this with people, I'm not comparing us to soldiers in combat. I'm not at all. But like soldiers in combat, nobody gets it like the people that were there
Yeah.
get it. So in that first year, we all struggled. It was tough because also this was the good news story of the year in our country. We had just come out of 2008, the big financial crisis, and it happened in New York where just, 8 years before had been one of the most devastating days in our country. So to see this miracle kind of happen at the same spot that 9/11 happened, it was the good news story of the year.
Yeah.
And people would come up to you and be like, that so cool? And you're like, not really. Like, but you're thinking, well, I guess I should think that's cool. But, but why am I so sad? That the fragileness of life still overwhelms me.
Yeah.
But it really was overwhelming me in that season. So there was, you've heard the saying, misery loves company.
Yeah.
There was something that was just so life-giving to being able to look at somebody that had, when I met my seatmate, to sit across the table from him with 3 hours at Starbucks and just debrief, download, share all the raw emotions was just so valuable because nobody gets it like somebody that was there get it. But you know what? We had an event at the 1 year anniversary. We got to go back to the spot of the landing. At the time of the landing on the New York ferry boats, Grey Goose sponsored all the vodka, so we got to toast the geese.
So funny.
So funny.
What a marketing move.
Sullenberger was there. I took my mother so that she could hug his neck. She needed to express some appreciation to him. That night, this artist, I think they were from Mexico, made these huge geese piñatas. We got to beat the geese. I mean, you get a group of people that have survived something like that together. We have a big time. And we had like a 3 year anniversary. We got to go see the plane. It was on exhibit in Charlotte. And that was such a moment for me, Grace. A couple of just the appreciation. I've talked about the first responders. I've talked about Sullenberger. As silly as this sounds, about 6 months after, I went back to New York and I stood at the shores of the Hudson River and I just thanked the river for being there, for being wide enough, being long enough. I know that sounds so crazy, but just being able to express that appreciation just made me feel so much better. But when I got to see the plane, just an appreciation for every engineer, every mechanic that built that plane. My seatmate and I, we were standing outside the plane and we were on row 26, which was the last row of the plane. We're standing there, we're looking at the plane. Well, there's this big crimp in the side of the fuselage, and this engineer comes up. He does not realize my seatmate and I are passengers at the point, and he goes, look at that crease right there at row 22. This thing should have never held together. It's unbelievable. He said it should have just cracked in two right there at row 22. My seatmate and I look at each other like, well, glad it didn't. We were on row 26, so that would have been, so just this, I just had such a tremendous, I still do, gratitude. Every time I get on board an airplane, I touch the outside of it as I board, and, it's just what people are able to do and the innovations, and just a huge appreciation for that. After this happened, about 3 days after, I was interviewed by the engineers of Airbus. And they were from, I think, France. And they were like, help us build a better airplane.
Wow.
Like being able to talk to people that have seen, did the aisle lights come on? Did the airbags drop down? I mean, he said every detail you can remember will help us build a better airplane.
Wow.
Yeah, which was really, really really cool. I'm not even sure where I went on that train of thought, but I was just like, just the appreciation
Totally.
for every aspect of it.
Wow. That, yeah. And it just goes back to all the things that had to be in place. Like, thank you, God, that it was a river that was wide enough. Thank you that you put mechanics that built a very well-built aircraft. Like,
that should not have held up.
right. Because it could have been one, to your point, that was poorly made and...
Right. So sometimes when people get upset about, I'm not a political person, but when some people get upset about regulations and guidelines, and sometimes things are there. I mean, things need to be tested. We need to be, whether it's with drugs or with cars or with planes, or sometimes that sort of stuff that feels like a lot of red tape ends up paying off in the long run.
Yeah. This is a way broader life application. I have such a hard time coming up with words to respond to your story because it's just so beyond me.
And you're so familiar with it.
I know, but every time I hear it, it just, it's so crazy. I'm so excited for people to get to hear it. But I was thinking too, when you were talking about the solidarity that you felt with the people that you experienced it with, I just think there's also a broader life application for that. And I'm not comparing being a mom to what you went through, but it's like,
yes,
people can't understand what you go through being a mom until you're a mom. Right. I can empathize with your story and when you tell it, I feel so much, but I still wasn't there and I still didn't experience it. Right. Same with being married. There are things that I don't mean to be patronizing in any of this, but it's like there are things in marriage that you just can't understand. There's things that moms who have lost their children, only other moms who have lost children can understand that.
Not even a word for that.
Right. I just think in life, seeking out people, me and Annabelle were just talking about that with my dad. One of my best friends lost her brother to cancer, Kate, and I sent her a voice memo recently, and I was like, I can't tell you what a treasure you've been through this, because she can speak to it, because she watched her brother lose his health and eventually lose his battle to cancer, and they walked it. I should have her on this podcast. The way that he walked it in step with Jesus was so beautiful, but she just understands it in a way that other people can't. And I think a lot of times, if someone is listening and you're in a season where you feel lonely, like seeking out people, that's why they have support groups for wives who are, or not just wives, spouses who are married to someone who struggles with alcoholism. Like, having shared experiences with doing life with people who you have those shared experiences with for the things that are hard in your life is so huge. And I think that's just a great broad application for any hard season of life you find yourself in, or anything you're walking through, just finding other people who can relate,
And relate to those people, reach out to those people, and then when you get through that season of hard or difficult, figure out how to pay it forward and help the next person.
Yeah.
That's what keeps us. I mean, we're meant to be in community. When you go through a challenge, we've all been through challenges. We'll continue to go through challenges. We're not promised easy days every day.
Right.
We're not.
We're actually promised hard lives.
We're actually promised hard lives. So I've tried to, I had a faith when I boarded that plane. A lot of people think, boy, I bet your faith was really magnified when you stepped off. Like, not actually, no. Actually, there was this sense of onus, this kind of weight on, what do you want me to do with this, God?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to carry this forward? What am I supposed to learn, or what am I supposed to help someone else learn?
Yeah.
So I think when you're going through the challenges, like you said, find a community, find people that have already walked that road. But once you hopefully get to the end of that road and there's a fork and you get to take it, try to help somebody else coming through it.
Yeah. There's a verse in Proverbs. I've known this verse since middle school, and I'm usually really bad at scripture references, but it's Proverbs 24:12. And it says, once our eyes have been opened, we can't pretend we don't know what to do. For God, who weighs our hearts and keeps our souls, knows that we know, and then holds us responsible to act. And I think, obviously that applies to, like, salvation. When you know about Jesus and the peace and the joy that he gives you, then you're responsible to share with others. But I think to that point, God gives us hard things so that it can be part of our testimony and we can share it with others. And you're responsible to share what he revealed to you through that, At whatever my life looks like in 5 years, whatever I've learned from my dad's battle with ALS, like, I'm responsible to share that with other people, because if I just hide it,
right,
then what was the point of all of the suffering and the hard? What was the point of you going through that if you're not going to share with other people? And I'm really proud of the way that you do that.
Thank
And you do it really freaking well.
you. Thank you.
I love listening to you speak.
God, he gave me a story and he gave me the ability to tell it. So,
Yeah.
and it's like going to struggles and failures and hard times. Unfortunately, that is where we tend to learn the most. It's like, my kids are all north of 20. They're all quote, quote, adults. Actually, two, I guess, are legit adults, and one is, he's coming along. But I tell, and I tried to do this as a mother. I didn't do it as much as I should, but I tell my friends like you that are in the early, phase of motherhood, you got to let your kids fail sometimes. Because that's where they learn.
Yeah.
That's where we learn. And that with the struggles. And whether it's a failure or a struggle or a challenging time, working through it yourself is where you're going to learn the most. And then hopefully that's going to pay dividends because you're going to help someone else with what you learned.
It's like in that Bema Seat.
Yes.
The sermon. I'm just going to call it the Bema Seat sermon.
It's
called like the Bema Seat of Christ in the Bible. And it is talking about that's like Christ's judgment seat for believers. So in this Bema Seat sermon, the guy who goes to heaven that experiences the rapture on a random Tuesday gets there. And one of the things he says, there's a guy that goes to his judgment where he's talking to Jesus about his life and reliving his life and what he did that was worthwhile and eternal. And he went through so much suffering. He was from Japan and all Christians were being martyred and he was like skinned alive. But it was a really brutal story. And if you listen to his life, you're like, oh my gosh, his whole life was marked by suffering. But the random guy that was on his way to work on a Tuesday said, I'm so jealous of that man that was in Japan because he was so bonded and tethered to Jesus through that. Like he knew Jesus in such an intimate way through his suffering that I never experienced because I lived a pretty cush life and I didn't really suffer. And that's in the Bible too. There's so much scripture about what suffering produces in us and in our relationship with God. But it's just a good reminder that, like, from an eternal perspective, suffering carries so much meaning.
So much meaning. And, I talking about, like, one of the things I love about we're so going to Uganda is, and I'm always we were in Uganda with Loved One, which Grace's mom founded, and I'm on the board. And we treat malnourished babies in Uganda. Not to be a shameless plug for Uganda, for Loved One here, but shameless. Always shameless. Yeah. But I remember being there one time, and we were in a church service out in the middle of a field with a shed. Remember, you went to go to the restroom in the weeds, and there was a snake that okay, you remember that?
I do remember.
Well, at the start, I'm going way down on a tangent here, but it was this aha moment where you're talking about, like, the man in Japan had so much suffering. You didn't have a lot of noise, a lot of cush, a lot of luxuries. We're sitting there in this church service, and every single elder that stood up at the start of the service, because in Uganda, culturally, everyone introduces themselves, but every one of them led with, I thank God for keeping me alive.
Yeah.
That was the first sentence out of their mouth. And I thought, they have to rely on the Lord day to day. They really appreciate that life is hard. Life is not easy over there. And just being guaranteed tomorrow, they're just so grateful for keeping me alive to this day.
Yeah.
And I remember having a moment like, that totally resonated with me because since this day in January of 2009, I've literally thought, thank you, God, for just keeping me alive. But I think day to day, we don't all think that way because our life, by and large, is not full of suffering. We have seasons of suffering, and it can be very tough. But that just resonated with me. Like the man, there's a lot that distracts us from what's important in like our culture.
That verse, I don't know where this is, but it says, basically, I think it's in the Gospels, that it's like a rich man entering into heaven is like a camel trying to enter through the eye of a needle. Yes. And that sounds so daunting. If you believe and walk with Jesus, believe in and walk with Jesus, there will be fruit in your life and you can spend eternity with him. It's not impossible. But when you think about the majority of the world that lives when you think about the majority of the world lives lives that are marked by suffering. Their whole life.
Right.
But 90% of the people who will listen to this podcast, 90%, I'm sure there are people who are listening who their lives are truly marked start to finish by suffering. go through hard seasons. I'm in a really hard season. But my life is still, it hasn't been every day. I'm dependent on God to literally survive.
Right.
And that creates a tetheredness to God where it's like, that's going to be easy for you to get into heaven because you and Jesus are like this. Whereas it takes so much more effort in the world that we live in to pursue God and pursue a relationship, because you can put your faith and your hope in other things because you have
Right.
all the resources that you need.
So true.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this was so great. I always love hearing your story. This is so fun. I can't believe I'm sitting here with the podcast.
I'm so proud of you for doing this, for saying yes. You inspire me. One of the things I appreciate, I'm in my early 50s, same as Grace's mom, and I've so loved doing life with Grace and Lauren and other people. I appreciate y'all being willing to do life with us old ladies, if you will. But I learned so much from you all, and I've kind of you're inspiring me by doing this podcast. You're inspiring me because there's also this balance of receiving the signs that God's like, is this what you're encouraged, or am I trying to put my own will in front of, and reading? So there's been kind of a recurring theme for me, and just seeing you step out kind of encourages me to, maybe I need to say yes to that he kind of keeps putting in front of me. We'll see. So I appreciate you. You're an inspiration for sure, and a great mother, and going to be a fabulous podcaster.
Thanks. Definitely learning as we go. We've been laughing about all the technical difficulties, but this worked out so great.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Here. I love you.
I love you too. This is so fun.
So fun. Good job.
Thanks.